Welcome to the Success Resequencing Project. I'm Debbie Ponticus.
And I'm Jenn Newman.
Join us as we challenge the traditional definitions of success so you can build a fulfilling path of your own.
Get ready for inspired, candid conversations while gaining tools, inspiration, and confidence to create your own authentic success story.
I think making friends as an adult is probably one of the hardest things to do. When you own a business and have a family, finding extra time to truly get to know someone is difficult until it's not. When I met Jenn Newman, I knew within minutes that we were destined to be friends. I mean, anyone who can get my sick and twisted sense of humor is for sure someone I want to be around. Not only is she one of the funniest people I know, she is also the most talented, compassionate, and hardworking woman I know. We think alike and we dream alike, and that is why I know we are destined to do something great together. Jenn's story is truly remarkable, and she inspires me to be a better businesswoman, wife, and mother every day. I can't wait for you to hear her story and get inspired too. Well, today it's all about Jenn Newman. And I have been waiting for this day for a long time. No, in all seriousness, this is going to be exciting for me because, being able to tell your story, you motivate me, you inspire me, and there's so many things about your story that I know are going to do the same for others. So, let's just take a moment. Wife to Jenn Newman, mother to Lila Grace.
Yes.
Classically trained soprano soloist.
True.
Multi-million-dollar real estate agent.
Thank you.
Yes. Now co-founder of the Success Resequencing Project. Let's just marinate on that a minute.
Let's just sit with that for a hot second.
That's right. What an amazing path and how many accomplishments and what a great life that you've had so far and so much more to go. But that's a lot of that. We're going to unpack a little bit on how all of this came to be. And I think that what we need to do for our listeners to really get a good understanding of who Jenn Newman is we got to go back in time a little bit. So we're going to get in our little time capsule and we're going to fly back to Jenn as a little girl. I love this question. So talk to us about that little girl and what did she want to be when she grew up?
Well, she was I don't ever remember myself feeling like a child. I always remember myself feeling like a grown-up. And that may sound somewhat odd, but it really is true. I feel like I finally grew into myself really in my 40s where I finally felt like it matched. But little Jenn was, my nickname was Niffer. And
so where did that come from?
My father called me Niffer.
Okay.
N-I-F-E-R.
I love it.
So I just decided to go the other way and go J-E-N-N. But I only say that because I was very, as a little girl, was very much about everything in my world revolved around music.
Okay.
So my mom said that I sang before I spoke, and that I was always humming or making some sort of, I was always trying to emulate music.
Yeah.
And I genuinely don't know a life without music. So from the time I think mom and dad purchased their first piano, I think I was a year and a half or 2 years old. And so I don't know life without the piano being played, without singing, without music making.
And where did that come from? Was there someone else, your mom or your dad, that had a passion for music as well?
I come from a long line of creatives.
Okay.
My mom's side of the family, my mom was a pianist, singer, dancer, twirler. My grandmother, her mother was an organist. They had an organ in their home. My grandfather was an artist, and my other aunts and uncles, all creatively inclined. Mixed media artists, my aunt is. My other aunt can sew and do anything. So there's a creative streak on that side of the family for certain. And then on my dad's side, my aunt, his sister, was an incredible musician. And my dad is the same kind of guy that has a great ear. He was never a trained musician, but he has since over the years built speakers and can tune things. And he's just, so it's there.
Right.
So I do come by it honestly. I was one of the only ones that really chose to try to pursue it as a career. That was.
Got it. So let's go down that path a little bit. So let's talk about college. Okay. So we'll fast forward a few years and we'll go into college. A lot of pivotal moments for you in college. One being that's where you met your husband, Jem.
Yes.
One of my favorite stories. So talk about that a little bit. So this little girl who had this passion for music, who really wanted to fulfill that as a career.
Yep.
What made you have the choice of, okay, let's do this in college? Like, talk to us about that.
Sure. So throughout all of my elementary, middle school, and high school, I was either playing piano up until middle school, or I was singing. I started taking voice lessons when I was in junior high officially. And all through high school was in competitive choir, was, singing in all the solo and ensemble competitions, and realized that was something I really enjoyed. I had a classical voice teacher from the age of 12 forward who was starting to, with a changing young voice, you don't really start singing opera at 12 years old, but I did have a classically trained teacher. So she was encouraging me I was obviously being trained as a classical singer.
Yeah.
And she was very, very influential and kind of future casting for me what that could look like.
Sure.
Through high school, as I competed in choir, as I competed in the solo and ensemble competitions, I just couldn't imagine doing anything else. So it wasn't as though I had my heart set on something else and then kind of fell into music. It was like, this just is what I'm going to do. So as I was preparing to go to college, then I had been in Tennessee, they had an organization called the Governor's School for the Arts, and I had done that between my sophomore and junior years, and knew that then I was in a studio with a teacher at the time on a college campus, and I could see where that was going. And I was in. That was what I wanted to do. So when I applied for school, it was under the auspices of becoming a voice major, not maybe necessarily knowing all that entailed, because I was from the South. I was very naive. I was raised in church music and sang church music my entire life, and didn't understand that Broadway was an actual genre. I thought it was just one theater in New York City. Like I was that naive
Broadway,
about it.
It is that.
Right. It was like
Phantom of the Opera. That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, what is this? There are multiple theaters. That's cool. So I didn't discover what was really possible until I went to college and got accepted to conservatory, and that's where it all began for me, really,
truly. So explain
truly.
what that means. What is being accepted into conservatory?
So I went through an audition process at multiple universities where you prepare a series of repertoire that you're performing for a panel of adjudicators, which are typically faculty members. And then you go through that process and you're selected whether or not you're going in or not.
Okay.
So I did that. And then one of those schools was Arizona State, which is where I ended up attending, and was accepted to their School of Music, which functioned very much like a conservatory. It wasn't its own standalone conservatory, but within the School of Music, it was its own entity. And that's where I got accepted.
And so is that like the undergrad, or is that you went through undergrad and now this is like a master's program?
Fair enough. Conservatory in this case, my education was for my bachelor's.
Okay.
So it was undergrad that I did that first degree in music.
Okay. So here's Miss Jenn in college and her conservatory here in Arizona. And is it safe to say you thought that you were the thing?
I definitely, I did not lack in the understanding that I had the makings of being able to do this for the long haul.
Yes. That was a very eloquent
way of saying, yes, I was
a little
shit. Yeah. Or you thought of that way. You know, and the reason why I say that is because it leads into this next part of what I'm going to ask you about that I absolutely love. So you are auditioning, I believe, if I'm getting the story correct, for a musical.
Opera.
Thank you. And there's a male lead part. And you were very concerned about who was going to get this male lead part because it would certainly either help you or hurt you. Okay. So in walks a gentleman who you have heard of, right? And so tell us what goes next.
So the way the process worked during undergrad was that, or for me personally, was in undergrad, was that we would audition for a show. And then after the decisions were made, after everybody had met and adjudicated and decided and cast the show, then a cast list was posted on this bulletin board, and we would wait until the wee hours of morning for them to post the cast list. And I was auditioning for Mozart's Magic Flute, and they wouldn't post the cast list. And they put a note up on the board that was basically like, we're delayed, we won't be able to have it up. And I was
like, no, you're not.
I was like, actually, you are going to, actually, you will post this cast list and you can leave someone TBD. Like, I don't understand why we can't post the cast list. So the head of the department had said, just settle down. Like, we will, but we are waiting on this new bass baritone that we have. And unfortunately, he had a family emergency. And so he was not able to audition. So we're waiting until everything is set. I was perhaps maybe a little miffed. And so we waited for this guy. So one thing leads to another.
Miffer, it was Miffer.
Right?
It was a little miffed.
A little miffed. So we get the cast list gets posted several days later, and this guy that they were waiting for didn't get the specific role. He got another role. And I was like, okay, I don't understand why we had to wait, but whatever. It's so typical.
Yeah.
So anyway, long story short, we show up to rehearsal for the first rehearsal, and I walk into at the end of someone rehearsing their scene. So it's now time for my scene to come up, and I sit down waiting, and this tall, dark, and handsome guy opens his mouth and is like this voice I've never heard before. And the music director sees this happening. I have no poker face, so he sees this happening, leans over and he said, "Do you see why we waited?" And I said, yeah, okay. And so as his scene ended, they took a break, and then they were getting ready for my scene. And so I marched up to this guy and I said, "Hi, I'm Jenn Rydell, you want to go for coffee?" And the rest is history.
That's how you became Jenn Newman.
And that is how I became Jenn Newman.
So I love that story. I love it because honestly, it says a lot about, well, there's more to that story.
There is more to the story.
Which, you know, to know you is also to know Jem. He's a big part of your life.
For sure.
Huge supporter. And I think one of the things that we talk about a lot in someone who's choosing to kind of resequence their success or their life, it's about who's around you and who's supporting you. So it's important in those pivotal moments and times that you have that. So he is a huge part of your life, your path, and all of that.
Absolutely.
But I love how he responded to you.
We went for coffee, I think a day or two later. And of course, we're still in school. So I had dance class, which I really hated and detested, but I was dressed for dance class, cut out sweatshirt, very, very like 80s.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Total flash dance, sports bras hanging out. Sunset Boulevard, cut out sweatshirt. I've got these wiki pants on. I've got non-matching socks. And I mean, it was really, I was feral. That's really when feral Jenn really started. And we go to coffee, and we go to order our drinks. I order mine, Jim orders his, and we go sit down. Drinks get called. I go up and pick them up. I put them down, or Jim went and picked them up, put them down, and he says, as we were waiting for our drinks, key moment, he looks down at me. He's 6'2" to my 5'6", right? So he looks down at me just with this face, and he says, 1982 called. They want their look back. And I was so taken aback in that moment, like, how dare you say that? And looked up at him and I said, oh, wow, I love you. And we sat down, we laughed about it. He was spot on. And then the drinks came and something was wrong with his drink and he was just going to take it and not deal with it. I mean, Jim's like super easygoing, right? He's not going to get ruffled about stuff like that. I was like, that's unacceptable. March back, take the drink, get him not only a new drink, but at the time when Starbucks used to give the coupons for free drinks, right? I come back, I'm like, here you go, fixed. So if he were to tell the story, that's the moment he knew, I knew, when he was just able to serve it right there. Yep. Just no holds barred. Yep. Not gonna let me be a priss about anything. Just like,
and then you guys were together from that point on.
From that point on. Yeah. Literally that, my whole world changed.
Yeah. So, okay. So you graduate. Mm-hmm. So what year was that? That was...
So I was done. I should have been done. I had been in a pretty decent car accident in my junior year. So my graduation date got pushed anyway because I had to take medical withdrawal during that time. And so had that accident not happened, I would have graduated before Jim started his master's. So there's no question in my mind, it's interesting to watch God's timing and things. I also would not have married Jim had I gotten into the grad school that I wanted. And so it was so serendipitous at that time. I mean, there was just no question that the two of us it was done.
Meant to be.
And so that being said, major pivotal moment, major thing. So graduation time would have been 99 for me. And then I ended up not having enough classes to go full time. So I stopped school. Jim was still doing his master's. By this point, we had moved in together and we're already talking about getting married. And I ended up graduating in 2002. I went back. I had 2 classes left, was already working in corporate at that time, went back, took those 2 classes and graduated in 2002.
Amazing. So now I'm going to take us forward a little bit because I think another pivotal moment that has kind of crafted your path. 2008, recession hit.
Yep.
So tell us about how that pivot and that time transitioned, I guess, where you were with, Jem was in his master's prior, he graduated, then you were in corporate.
Yep.
So 2008, recession hit. And I believe that really, and correct me if I'm wrong, was where you transitioned almost out of necessity from pursuing singing to getting into corporate.
Right. So when I graduated in 2002, we moved to New York just about 6 weeks later, and we were in New York until 2004 when our daughter was born. We moved back when I was still pregnant with her, and I was working corporate. Jim was in new home construction on the corporate side, and we were plugging right along. We had our first house, then we were building our second house. The recession comes in 2008. Jim had made it through several rounds of layoffs. And when he got laid off, here in Arizona in particular, we were hit very hard, and especially in that industry. And so Jim was unemployed for about 1.5 years, and we couldn't get jobs to save our lives. I mean, when I say we applied for everything possible, we did. So when that happened, we knew the writing was on the wall, and we decided that we just needed to do something. We had to do something. We were losing everything. We knew we were going to file bankruptcy. We lost our home, the one we had built. And we had a 4-year-old. It was bananas time. And so at that moment, I had been singing consistently enough to where we were already talking about splitting time between New York and Phoenix again for me to keep singing more. And then when that recession hit, that also, with what happened in the country, that also meant a lot of arts funding was pulled back. A lot of symphonies were having to reprogram. Symphonies were shutting down. Companies were shutting down. It was a very challenging time for the arts then, as well as many other facets in our world, right? So I needed a job. I mean, at the end of the day, it came from a full survival mechanism. It was the end of 2008, getting ready to go into 2009. It was Christmas time. We had sent out holiday We couldn't even afford holiday cards. We sent out some like e-newsletter to everybody for the holidays. And we knew we were going to move. And so at that time, my temp agent from when we lived in New York before called me and said, I got your newsletter. Are you back? And I said, not yet. We will at some point. We're stuck. I mean, we
You're
really
just doing what you can to put
we were literally
food on the table.
Literally doing that. And she said, I have a job for you. This was on a Thursday afternoon. She said, I have a job for you. You're going to interview Monday. You need to figure out how to come to New York City between now and then. I got off the phone. I talked to Jim. I called my folks. I said, what do I do? And my dad said, I'll buy you a one-way ticket. And I said, okay. Packed my bags, looked at Jim and Lila, and said, I'll be back when I have a job in an apartment for us. And I ended up being in the city for about 2+ months before that all was locked in place. And at this time, we'd already filed bankruptcy. So we were waiting on our bankruptcy date with the court. And I got hired in the middle of a hiring freeze at New York University. And it was the absolute thing that turned our life around.
Yeah. I mean, what a courageous thing for you to have to do on all different fronts. One, to be faced with that, to be faced with bankruptcy, to be faced with you can't get a job. You have a 4-year-old daughter. You are just desperate to make ends meet.
Yeah.
You have an opportunity, a door opens. I love that your dad said it's a one-way ticket, make it or break it type of a thing. Like make this happen for yourself and for your family. And what a burden. I think we're getting out of the age where, it's expected that the husband or, be the provider per se. But in a sense, you're a mom of a 4-year-old and you're looking at your family saying, well, I got to go.
Gotta go.
And I'll call you when you can come kind of a thing.
It really was that. I mean, we legitimately had, in my mind, even in retrospect, we just didn't have another choice. Yeah. It is ironic. I mean, yes, to move back to New York City after losing everything and then to start again when the recession had obviously hit, but New York didn't weather it on the same timeline. We were already through the major part of it here in Arizona. So when we got there, it was true. That was when companies were laying people off. Yeah. The financial world, there's massive part of New York City. So there was a lot, it was happening, but it was a bit delayed there. Yeah. And so, yes, leaving your 4-year-old, because she wasn't old enough to understand.
Right.
She really was. She actually was just getting ready. No, she was 4. She knew, but to leave her.
Right. That has to be hard.
I mean, it was just, it was brutal, but it was my why. It was my, every night I would cry myself to sleep. When I was there, I stayed on my best friend's couch and every night I cried myself to sleep. And it was just like, then I'm going to find it. It's going to happen. Yeah. And it took, that job that I had applied for, that my temp agent had called me about, I was overqualified for it. And anyone who went through job loss during that time knows you were willing to take anything. Yeah. But then employers were still hedging their bets on how long you were going to stay. Yeah. And I was overqualified. And so they were like, you're going to be bored in a minute. And I couldn't care less. I was like, I just want to work. I need a paycheck.
And I need my family.
I need my family back. And so that was a time that, it worked itself out for the best. Yeah. But that was the longest 8 weeks of just not knowing because every day was uncertain.
Yeah. But I think what it shows is that, because you said a minute ago that you didn't have a choice.
No.
But you actually did. Because you have to give yourself credit because you made a difficult choice. You didn't take the easy road. And in that time and period, no road was easy. But you could have said no. And you could have figured out maybe not anything great. You could have stayed on friends' couches and all of this and just worked your way through it. But you said, this is not what we are meant for. No. So you did have a choice and you made it. And you made a difficult choice for you and your family. And your family made a difficult choice too. It wasn't, the support that you had to have to do that. So, I think that that's a critical thing to know, that you have that
in you to know sometimes in life or sometimes on your path, you have to make a difficult choice.
Absolutely.
But the fact that you did it from a mindset of there's no other way. There is no choice. I think that's the key. That you have a choice, but your mindset is there's no choice. I will succeed. And that's what gets you to the finish line on those difficult times.
Yes.
So not to continue down a challenging path, but you have had a lot of pivots and things in your life that I think have helped grow you into who you are today. So 2012 was a big year for you and your family. You lost 3 family members in 1 year, one being your brother to an overdose. Talk to us about how that year changed you and changed who you wanted to be and what you wanted to do.
When my brother died, it was Valentine's time. It was February of 2012. And typically I always had holiday gigs. So Christmas pops, 4th of July pops, Valentine's Day, all of those big holidays were usually me traveling somewhere for singing. And I remember coming out of Christmas, going into the top of the year, and I didn't have anything for Valentine's Day. And I remember thinking to myself, it's just odd. Like, it just feels weird to not be going anywhere. I say that because when my brother overdosed, it became so clear by the time we had the autopsy and had his funeral. I remember thinking in the moment, had I had gigs, like, this is why. Like, this was a moment where, there's that expression of rejection is God's protection sometimes, where it was like the path had been cleared for me to focus on the only thing that mattered, and that was that. And I say that because that was what caused my line of thinking after Adam died, that how else am I to use my voice? Because it felt very superficial in the months following his death to get on stage and perform. It just didn't, it wasn't time. And in retrospect, I recognize that it's, you have to heal the best in your own way. And as a performer, you still have a job to do, which is to serve your audience. But that was a point in time where the grief was just too much. I was not in a position to go stand on stage and sing. But it asked that question, it opened this door. And when I asked myself that question, I sat with it, and I ended up drawing a tree on a notebook paper, piece of notebook paper, and I still have it to this day. But on the trunk of the tree, I wrote the word voice. And then as the branches came out of the tree, it was all these things that mattered to me, things that I felt I could advocate for, things that I could bring more awareness to, things like women's health, things like advocacy for the LGBTQ community, for how I wanted to be able to sell. There were sales things that I wanted to do. It was a very interesting tree.
Yeah.
And it became something that I had out all the time. I just would glance at it and look at it. What I realized through that experience was, although singing was still very much a part of that tree, I knew that there were 2 little muscles in my throat that were meant to do more than just sing. And that was, as a performer with that identity, especially when you're a singer, because it's your voice. Let's just put it this way, that when you're on that path, it's odd to step away from it. Not only what it feels like to the person that's happening to, but there's a lot of feedback from other people. Yeah. Are you sure? You're really throwing it away. Are you sure that's what you want to do? Are you selling out? Are you, why are you giving up? Things like that.
Right.
And I won't say that it was always that overt, but those questions came up.
Yeah.
And I just knew in my bones that it was time to be open. That's all it was. I went into therapy right after Adam died, and there was a lot of work to do around childhood trauma and his death and all of that. And so I realized I was finding my voice at that time. I knew how to sing. That was never the question. It was about my voice, Jenn's voice, and what that meant. My values, my principles, the things that were important to me, not anyone else's that I took on.
Yeah.
And so that was a absolute pivotal moment was then. And during that experience, I lost Adam in February. Then I lost both of my grandparents within 3 weeks of each other in December. And when Adam died, he, lived a challenging life as an addict. And I say that with great compassion, because I think that we demonize addicts and we vilify them. And my brother's life was, yes, challenging. And yes, that was based on the addiction and the decisions and choices that he made along the way. But the pastor came to the house, to my folks' house, to say, okay, who's giving the eulogy? And no one could put words around it. And I just sat there that day. I'll never forget sitting on the couch, listening to everybody talk back and forth. And I just said, I'll handle it. And so I gave my brother's eulogy. And then that year when my grandparents died, same thing happened. And I ended up giving 3 eulogies that year. And I realized in that moment that, like it or not, it was my responsibility to do that, but it was also something that I felt inside. That's what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to speak up when others can't.
Yeah.
That was, it just came to, ironically enough, it came to life through that experience. And that tree came in the midst of all of that. And it was just really, truly about identifying that and saying, I don't think I can, when you know better, you do better, right? So it was like, I have awareness to this now. I can't turn back.
Right.
I can, but I'm not going to.
Right.
And so what does that mean moving forward? And that started a nice long journey.
Yeah. And it did. And I mean, what a way to, unfortunately in the circumstances, but fortunately to truly have a moment where you find out what you're supposed to do.
Right.
The calling, right? Some people call it a calling, where you now know this drive, this mission, this quest to use your voice has so many different meanings and so many different ways that you can take that.
Sure. And
that you can help people. And I think that you, from the years that I've known you, you have that mentality of like, I'll take care of it. I've got it. I'll get it done. And sometimes that can be a fault.
Sure, it can.
Where it's like you take on too much. Like it's hard to let others help.
Sure.
But I think it's a personality trait that has helped you and to just get through those tough moments. It gives you a sense of control, you know. Course. And when you're going through tough times like that, I can only imagine that having something to grasp at that you can control is comforting.
It is.
And so as you found your voice and you had your beautiful tree, which is, I love that. And I'd love to see.
I'll show it to you.
You'll have to show me.
I will.
But I think it also transitioned you into your new career and understanding that your voice can be used to help others in what else but real estate.
I know, right? It's so ironic.
So how did that come about? So how did you, where do we connect the dots on that?
Where do we connect that?
Why are we crazy enough to be in this industry?
Fair enough.
But yeah, tell me how you kind of got into real estate.
When we were in New York City, I was, a friend of mine from undergrad actually was there, and he and I were just always obsessed with real estate. We loved just putting things together, putting spaces together. We would kibitz back and forth about the things we were doing in our own little apartments. And then friends started moving, people were coming, and they needed help finding a place. And Jason and I just took the ball and ran with it. And he was very much, he was in the arts as well, was a professional manager and had his own career path, but that was just a passion project for him. And so we had some friends move and said, we'll figure it out. We'll help you find a place. And we did. And we did it more than once. And we just had a blast with it and said to each other kind of off the cuff multiple times, we're like, we really should just do this. Like, we should just go into real estate. Well, daunting. It felt daunting at the time. Plus, after everything we had been through, the last thing I wanted to do was go into a commission-based business because I did not feel secure yet. I was not there. As we were looking into real estate school, I was getting ready to go. And that's when my brother died. And so I tabled it. I was like, now is not the time to make a change. We've got enough going on. So we put it on hold. Cut to years later, I would say from 2012 to 2016, when we moved back to Arizona in 16. And in those 4 years, through therapy, through the tree, through kind of redefining what normalcy looked like for me, all of that, one thing that became clear was that I wanted to have my own business.
Yep.
And it really was a transition of knowing that I didn't feel that I needed to continue to pursue a full-time career in music. That ship sailed for me. It wasn't because I didn't have what it took. It was that I didn't want to pursue it that way.
Right.
I had come to terms with it.
Yeah.
I wanted to sing on my own terms. I wanted to sing when I could and have it be this amazing, joy-filled experience, not a job.
Not a job. Yeah.
So as that happened, did a foray for a little bit of time. I kind of stumbled upon a network marketing opportunity, kind of put my toe in the water, did not resonate with the business part. Let me rephrase that. I didn't resonate with the identity that came with being in network marketing.
Right.
Okay.
Sure.
What I appreciated and what to me is invaluable about that experience was that it was a personal development journey. It was the first time I had really been exposed to motivational speakers, to self-help, personal development books, tactics of and mindset work.
Yeah.
And when that started, it lit me up inside. It really did. And I felt incredibly energized by it. And more importantly, I just felt like I had found a place.
Yeah.
And so business part failed. I just bombed. Okay. It's not that it doesn't work.
Right.
It was not for me.
For you.
Again,
Understood.
God was like, we're going to go over here now. Okay.
Right.
That's
Right.
fun, sweetie. But no, we're going to go do this.
Yeah.
Because it's truly beneficial to so many people, especially women in network marketing. There are so many opportunities for women. So I am in no way negating that, but it was not right for me.
Right.
And so I decided, in the midst of all of that, I had decided to leave my corporate job, that I was going to build this network marketing business, and really thought I was going to make it work because that's my personality. If I'm going to do it, if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it.
Right.
And it just didn't. So we moved back to Phoenix and all in that journey. And I thought, I now have tasted being my own boss. There's no turning back.
Yeah.
I called 2016 the year of the diaper. It was like sitting in this nasty, dirty diaper. And I couldn't change it. Right? I was like, I'm in this diaper and I can't change it. And what I realized was you can change your own diaper.
Yeah.
Okay. So just saying. Was like
listen,
the
if it stinks,
was
change
it.
Right. Like,
so I had such an incredible support system through Jim, some family, and honestly from my friends that had been around me for not only forever, but then friends that I made in network marketing that just so happened to be here. So when we moved back, I had another renewed sense of community. And they knew that I was not going to stay in this other arena. They were like, she's going to go do something. And one of my best friends, Chrissy, had said to me, she's like, Newman, you've got this. I said, what other than singing? What would you want to do? If money were of no object, like what would you want to do? And I was like, I've always wanted to do real estate. Because in my mind, network marketing was going to give me the opportunity to build the finances to then go do real estate. It was always like, I'm going to go back to it.
That was the end game.
Correct.
Just how do I get there?
Correct. And she's like, okay.
Just do it.
She said, a friend of ours owns a real estate company here in Phoenix. Let me connect you. Let's just put you together for coffee and see what happens. And I did. And she too, creative, former chef, had owned a restaurant here in town. Total creative, just she oozes creativity. And when we met, she was the one that gave me the permission, because I had said, "You're a mom. I've been gone. The last time I was here, the world had come to an end in Phoenix.
Right.
Now here we are all these years later. Can I do it? Is there a market to do this? How?"
Yeah.
We sat for 2 hours, she and her husband, and they were like, "Go to school. We'll wait for you. Go to school." And I did. I thought, I'm gonna go for it. Why? What do I have to lose? Because here's when I knew things were tight. We were back on one income. We were back here in Phoenix. We've got a growing kid. Like, it was not the time for me to not be working. And I had never not worked in my life.
Right.
So it was also a very humbling experience to have Jim being the primary breadwinner. I felt I had to go through that process. I needed to know what it was like to not have that control for a moment. It was a very important lesson for me. And when that all happened, the long and the short of it was that after we got through that and I decided, well, do I just need to just go back to corporate? Like, now's the chance. Like, Jim was gone to work.
It's a comfort blanket.
Yep. I'm like, you know what? Get over yourself. You and your big dreams. Who do you think you are? You need to just buckle down, go get a corporate job and suck it up. That was the conversation I had in my living room that day. Went to Indeed to look at jobs. I almost threw up. And I literally closed my laptop and I said, I'm going to go for it.
Right.
And that
it was just like when you took off to New York.
It was
like,
just
there's
like
no
it.
other way. There's no other choice. This is happening.
This is happening.
And then here you are, several years later.
Crazy.
Multi-million-dollar producing agent.
Yeah.
You now have a team of your own.
Yep.
And, the sky's the limit. I mean, you really have created an amazing business for yourself, coached agents, still coaching agents. I mean, it's inspiring, I think, just to hear this journey that you've been on. And I think some of the key things that are takeaways are you have a sense of just that grit that you there's no place like home, right? Like you're going to get it done. It's in you, you're going to do it.
Yep.
You're going to take on what you need to take on and do what you have to do.
That's right.
And life's going to throw you some curveballs, but you just kind of figure out where you should go with it, Yeah. So congratulations on this amazing journey and this amazing business that you have. Before we end, there is another important thing that I think we need to talk about, and it goes back to the tree that you mentioned and the branches.
Yeah.
And one of the branches that you mentioned that's important to you and still is your advocacy and support of the LGBTQ plus community. So let's talk about that, because we just barely touched on that, but it's a big part of your life, and I want you to take a chance to explain why.
Thank you for that. Well, it's personal. It's personal. And I think that being said, I was raised in a very conservative environment where being gay was viewed as a sin. It was viewed as something that was wrong. It was not biblical. And when you're raised with that framework, it can create some definitions around people stereotyping people, and that all is well and good if you don't have faces and people that who identify that way. And so as a young teenager, I didn't really know anyone, so I thought. And my high school choir director, who was very influential in my musical path, also the music director at our small church that we went to, and he came out and was HIV positive. And when he came out to the church, he was fired on the spot. And I was gobsmacked that a church could do that to one of their own. I had a very difficult time understanding why someone would be outcast for who they are.
Yeah.
It did not make sense at all. And it was a very pivotal moment. Not long after that, my aunt came out to me right when I was graduating high school. She had lived with a woman for 17 years. But that was in the 70s and the 80s.
Yeah.
People
Just
were not everyone was
talk
out
about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so then she came out and then had met her now wife, my other aunt. And I just was so grateful to have, first of all, the privilege. Someone coming out to you is a privilege. It's a very intimate moment because someone that trusts you and feels that you can hold the space, and that it's a moment of faith for them and hope that you're going to be accepting and loving and kind. It's a really precious moment. And I knew that in time, in retrospect, that's a real gift. And so how could these two people, very different, totally different, parts of my life, how could they be rejected?
Right.
It just made no sense. To this day,
it doesn't
frankly,
make any sense.
it makes zero sense, which is why, and that's one of those moments where I just don't understand because I don't need to, because that's just not okay.
Right.
So that's where that real feeling of standing up came from. And I did have to stand up to people about that because unfortunately that was not accepted by all. Went to college. Again, that naive girl didn't realize that when you drop this kid into a theater, music program, that's actually a place where it is. You talk about open and affirming. Right. That's the place.
Yeah.
So now, best friend from college, so many of my friends from college over their experience came out, and it was beautiful. Mm-hmm. And so again, couldn't reconcile why that was a problem. And so then as time went on, marriage equality became a real issue to argue and stand for. Yeah. And when that happened, my aunt had already been through had a ceremony at home. And then as the laws started to change, I watched when you don't have a piece of paper that marries you. To me, that's the ultimate definition of commitment.
Right.
And so in that experience, that is when I realized I'm standing up for that because they are amazing and we should have it. And that's the way it's going to be. So as time went on, we fought for marriage equality in New York City. We marched. That all came to be. And then I am blessed beyond measure that I have a gay child. And
she's amazing.
She's amazing.
She's absolutely amazing.
She's amazing. And so, it's personal.
Yeah.
It's personal because our brothers and sisters in the world should not be hated for who they are.
Yeah.
And as much work that we've done, there's still that much more to do.
Sure.
And I have had the blessing in my life to have those people that I love and stand up and say, that's not okay with me. But more importantly, it's because we just as a society should not do that. And especially if you call yourself a Christian, you call yourself someone that has a higher power, we don't turn our backs on our brothers and sisters. And so that's, for me, it's just a non-negotiable. And if that means that I need to be the mama bear that stands up and says, that stops with me, then that's my job. But more importantly, think about the people. It's just people I love.
Yeah. Well, and I think what it does is it shows yet again your true devotion and passion and calling to use your voice.
Absolutely.
And, in one of our standards at the Success Resequencing Project is the importance of voice.
It's in you, it's yours to say.
And I think that pillar is there for us because of you. And you inspire. And I want our listeners and those who watch us to understand the importance of what you stand for and that the voice has a lot of different
uses and meanings, and that what we believe in, and I think what you're so passionate about and what are going to help our listeners understand is that you have to stop and listen to your own voice.
Yes.
And whatever that is saying, however you need that to ring true for you is the only way that you're going to find fulfillment and ultimately a success in your life.
For sure.
So
Absolutely.
thank you. Thank you for being that voice to this cause, this mission, this movement that we're creating together. Yeah. And you continue to inspire me. You continue to make me laugh, which is gold for me. It's what beats my heart every day is laughter. So
Likewise.
Thank you for sharing your story and for inspiring those who are listening today.
It's been a privilege. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Thanks for joining us. If you loved this episode and know of someone who would find value in it, please spread the word and share it with a friend. We are passionate about redefining success, and it would mean the world if you could help us get our mission out to as many people as possible. Please take a moment to write a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. You can also hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Connect with us on Instagram at Success Resequencing Project or via our website at www.successresequencing.com. We'd love to hear your story.